My daughter's brother told the whole school a secret that should never be told, and now she's cutting him out, and going no contact forever. I'm at the end of my rope and desperate for some input. My husband and I have Daisy, 17 feet, and Daniel, 14 meters. They have never been overly close siblings, but weren't sworn enemies either. Just two different kids with two different personalities, but as long as everyone was respectful, that was okay with me. When Daisy was 10, she was the victim of abuse by a family member that saw them convicted and go to jail. She was in intensive therapy for years, and we are so proud of the strong, confident, and intelligent young woman she is today. She has always, however, been very private about it. Besides our family, her lifelong best friend and their parents knew, and that was it. My son, however, knew about it too. He flippantly told some friends about it 2 months ago, and before you know it, the whole school knew. Daisy was devastated, to say the least. She's been back in counseling since and has been coping as well as possible. This counseling has come at a financially really tough time for us and is obviously worth every penny, but the fact that we can't afford more counseling factors into the other part of this. Daisy blew up at Daniel when this first happened, and he saw the fallout of her coping with this firsthand. But since that night where she found out he told people and word was going around, she hasn't spoken a word to him. She doesn't look at him when he enters a room, or react when he speaks directly to her or about her, or anything else of the sort. For example, at dinner, she'll speak to us and he'll chime in, and she continues the conversation as though he hadn't said anything. Daniel has tried daily to talk to her and apologized, begged, pleaded and cried, and it's always the same. She'll usually crack a book or look at her phone, put some AirPods in and ignore him completely. She won't discuss it with me besides to say that he's dead to her, and she has no intention of ever seeing or speaking to him again when she moves out in 10 months, and she hasn't wavered even a bit in that sentiment since. I'm at a complete loss. Daniel is on total lockdown. He's lost his phone, video games, any sort of privilege or ability to do things with friends. He essentially goes to school, comes home, does his homework and goes to bed, and he knows we are devastated and beyond disappointed. I believe he's sincerely sorry and contrite. He's broken down crying and apologizing to us more times than I can count. I'm unsure of how to proceed. We can't afford family counseling, and Daisy's personal counselor won't talk to me about what she says to her about any of this, besides to say not to push her on anything. I know she has every right to be furious. But at the same time, I can't help but feel like it's also not mentally healthy for my son to be treated as though he literally doesn't exist in his home for the next year. I know it's a natural consequence, but it's gut-wrenching to see and be living with. Not to mention, as a mom, I don't want my kids to be permanently estranged. It breaks my heart. Has anyone else experienced anything even in the ballpark of this that could offer any advice? Update. I want to thank people for the advice, some of it harsh but necessary. Unfortunately, things have not gotten better. My son's grounding came to an end, and he got supervised access to his phone, video games and friends back. My daughter was livid with us about it, and no amount of explanation that continual punishment for a year wasn't an option made that understandable to her. I get that from her point of view, but it began to strain her relationship with me and her dad too. She still ignored my son, and he still cried and was depressed over it. I booked 3 sessions of expensive family counseling and made her come, but she just kept her earbuds on, with music playing, the entire time. She turned 18 in January. My son dipped into his savings to get her a necklace. I gave it to her and told her it was from him after she opened it, and she threw it away. Within a few days, she had moved out and into her best friend's parents' house without telling us she was going to. I invited her home for Easter, and she didn't come because her brother, who had nowhere else to go, would be here. I'm still at a loss. Her graduation is next week and we weren't formally invited by her. We basically got in, I guess you can come when I asked. My son obviously isn't invited, and he's still struggling mentally with all of this. Therapy and medication hasn't helped much, but our options of what we can afford are very limited. Has anyone been here? I never dreamed of having children estranged from each other and a daughter who pulled away from us over her brother's idiotic mistake. Relevant comments. I think you need to understand that your daughter is under no obligation to ever forgive her brother. What she went through as a child is something most people never fully recover from, and then was violated in another way by her own brother. A very personal part of her story was shared without her consent, and that's never going to be okay. If a friend of hers did this, most people would say to cut that friend out of your life. It's unfortunate that it's her brother and has an impact on the entire family, but your son made a mistake and has to deal with the consequences of his actions. For the record, I generally am against the whole cut them out of your life forever line of thinking, but in this case it isn't your call. You don't get to tell her she has to forgive him. You don't get to decide when she should be over it. She is traumatized and has to do whatever she can to heal, including not being around someone who added to her trauma and made her life harder. I get wanting your kids to be close. I am currently on a road trip with my 2 kids to drop the eldest off for a summer internship and love the bond my kids have with each other, but they would never do something your son did. They know personal things about each other that no one else knows and are going to keep it that way. That's what siblings do. Your son messed that up, not your daughter, so don't put the blame on her.